There he is, all dressed up, and I got a t-shirt on.
I didn't know how you wanted to do it, but I could have did it either
I'm
way.
like two guys just talking. He gets all fancy.
You want me to put it? You want me to put my shirt back on? I can put my other. Listen, hold on.
You're good. You're good. You're good.
I got the shorts on. Come on, I keep it back there on the. I keep it on the hook just in case.
Oh, that's too funny. That's too
How are
funny.
you, good sir?
I'm fine. Everything's going so smoothly. It's, kind of just can sleep all day. It's just, just boring.
We wish, huh?
Yeah.
How's the Nasdaq treating you?
Oh, Wall Street's fun.
Are they off your back yet? When are they going to lower that criteria?
I don't know. I right now all I'm focused on is, improving the financial performance and communicating and growing and Wall Street's typically wrong in my opinion in the short term and typically right in the long term. So I'm just gonna focus on the long term and just do what I think is right. But
Yeah, they're a lagger, right? They're
yeah.
a lagger. They fall behind. I told you this before on text. I think you're doing a great job on social, man.
Oh,
Um,
really? I think I'm doing a terrible job on social.
really? I don't think so, man. I follow a lot of CEOs and maybe you need more eyeballs, but you're communicating regularly, you're out there every day, you're telling people your story, you're consistent, and you're uniform with your messaging. So
Yeah,
to me, that's
keep beating the same thing over and over again. It's like rewind the interview from 10 years ago. It's like he's saying the same thing. I'm like, yeah, pretty much.
yeah, yeah, that's it. I like Elon Musk as a benchmark there. Same thing. We're going to Mars. We're going to Mars. We're
Yeah.
going to Mars. It's like a joke, a joke, we're going to Mars. A joke, we're going to Mars. So it's like, if it works, it just takes consistency. And you look at him and people are like, oh, well, dude, he's been at it for like 15, 20 years. Like
Yeah, I
it's
think a
not,
lot of
it just
people think
happened
like
yesterday.
SpaceX and Tesla are startups, and like the companies started in 2003 or so ish. I mean, it's
Yep.
like a couple of decades to get to this point of success, and it takes time. A lot of people want stuff. Unfortunately, we live in I don't know, I sometimes call it a Twitter microwave society. Like we need
Yep.
everything like now. Like it needs to be immediate. It's like, okay, well, you can't really build that kind of value like overnight.
I love
Um,
Buffett's quote for that, which is you can't have a baby in 1 month by impregnating 9 women.
yeah, exactly.
You still gotta wait. You still gotta wait 9 months, man. So I think you're way ahead of the curve. I love your product line. I've been checking you out. I love the pivots that you made in your product line. You're not overly ambitious talking about, some humanoid robot. You
Yeah.
got real products, that can be implemented today. And I think people will start to eventually catch up to the trend. Like you said, I think Wall Street's a laggard. By the way, we're probably at the worst time in history to be a public company. Like, I mean, just look at the data of all the public companies. I think
Oh,
there's
there's
four.
some insane number, Nick, was like five, it was more than 500 companies got delisting notices that usually, it's usually a couple dozen or something,
It's
much
50,
more normal.
50% right now are under a dollar.
It's
50%. There was
great.
only 6 IPOs on the New York Stock Exchange last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Six. Like that's nothing. I just saw an interview with Mark Cuban and he was saying how we don't have enough public. There's only, I think, 6,000 public companies.
I think it's
That's,
lot. It's five something. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's not a lot. I mean, that's New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. OTC is another animal, but that's not a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
we used
Yeah.
to have, 20, 30,000. Now to have that, and the ones that are there, I want to say, I think there's like 20. Last I checked, I think the NASDAQ had half of them were under a dollar. So
Yeah.
they're dealing with major
It's
liquidity
the
issues there.
market, it kind of fluctuates, right? I want growth, 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 growth. I don't care what the bottom line looks like. Oh, wait a minute, I changed my mind. I'd rather have like the bottom line and not so aggressive growth. And like all of a sudden everyone's like, uh-oh, gotta switch.
Well,
And
it's interesting. I tell my executives that that's just a macroeconomic thing, right? Like when they were printing a ton of money, no one cares about growth, right? So in 2022, 2021, when COVID happened, nobody cared because they were printing so much money. Everything's gonna go up. Doesn't matter what you do. There's so much money going into the economy that everything's going up.
yeah,
And then when the money starts contracting, then yeah, people start getting into the fundamentals a little bit more. I mean, I just talked to not your competitor, but somebody else in your field, Serve Robotics, and the only reason
I
they
know
got
them.
their stock price was getting crushed. The only reason they got it because Aegis, gave them a tranche of money there, and whoever put in the money had to get that stock price back up, right? And something that we've seen traditionally in financing, like a lot of these stocks only move when there's some guy behind it that needs to get out of his position. Once those guys are out, once those guys are out and you're betting on retail, it's like they don't have the juice, to move the stock. So in which case, you better hope for something audacious, and which, by the way, like I said, I think you're doing a great job of that. I think people haven't caught and they haven't there's not enough visibility on it, I guess.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I think anybody who doesn't think robotics, AI, and autonomy over the next, few years is going to make a massive impact is delusional. Like you're like the person who wrote in the 1990s that the internet's a fad, right? It's not
well, the problem is we oversold these, not AI so much because it just came out. But like I'm in the 3D printing sector with the other company, 3DX. I've been involved there for 3.5 years, and they oversold the market, right? And I'm the same thing with robotics, right? So for the last 30 years, we kind of had this expectation robots are going to take over. But first, you had to get the robotic arm at the factory before we can even get to, right, the real robot. So they oversold it, right? And I don't know if the entrepreneurs oversold it more than the investors bought the oversold, right? They wanted it to be faster.
Yep.
They wanted to see, the Jetsons robot come to their house by now. And
So
now it's
so
not
we
here.
we were supposed to like follow this some sort of a agenda, like we were supposed to talk before we hit the record button as to what we're actually going to do, but we just got right into it. So I was kicking
I
around
have
with you online that like maybe we should, I don't know, share some lessons learned or some war stories of stuff that's happened. And I got like, I don't know, three, four, five I could share if you wanted to kind of do the
yeah,
same.
I
And
wrote some down here too, that some war stories and some
all
things
right,
that
who
I've
wants to
learned
go
along the
first?
way. You want to go first?
All right, I'll go first. I'll go first. And the idea
Okay.
here is we do have between the two of us a lot of entrepreneurs and founders that listen to or follow what we're doing, and a lot of stuff that you end up learning isn't written down anywhere, or maybe one bit of advice can help somebody, and kind of that's the spirit of this. We can share some of the terrible things that have happened or good things,
For
and
sure.
pass it along a little bit. So one of the things that happened to me, Jesus, 21, I think during 2020, was just trying to figure out how to take Knightscope public. And the lesson learned here before I tell you what happened is be very careful who you take advice from. Um, so I spent 9 months going through, most people maybe don't know this, but there's multiple ways to take a company public. You can do an S1 underwritten IPO. You can do a SPAC and a de-SPAC. You can do a direct listing. You can do a Reg A plus a direct listing. You can do a reverse merger. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do it, and there's a lot of pros and cons that go along with it. And then underwritten or best efforts and all kinds of good and bad stuff. So I went around asking a bunch of folks for genuine advice. So I went to, maybe a small investment bank that really focuses on tiny IPOs like 3 million, 5 million, 7 million. I went to some mid-tier banks that, maybe do 100, $150 million ones. And then obviously during 2020, there was a lot of folks running around with, SPACs, raining upon everyone's head. And, kind of long story short is, you might be surprised by the advice I was provided. So the small investment banking firm said, you know, given your situation, the absolute best thing for you to do is a small IPO. Like, interesting. Okay. Then do the next call with the larger firm who specializes in, larger IPOs. And like, I think the deal we can do for you and makes the most sense is to do like 100 or $150 million IPO, and we kind of specialize on that, and it'll be absolutely perfect for you. Then go to the, few banks that were dealing with SPACs. What you really need to do is a transaction with the SPAC. And like after 9 months of going back and forth with so many people, in some cases that I, trusted or, valued their opinion, they were basically giving advice to an entrepreneur in order to sell what they're good at.
Yeah, yeah,
And, you know, it's you need to be super, super careful who you take advice from. Along the same, prior to Knightscope, this happened to me where some VC gave me some advice like, "Oh, listen, don't worry. We put in a bunch of money, and here's your PR firm that we handpicked for you. Here's your legal firm that we handpicked for you, and here's some other services that we handpicked for you." And I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Please sign here. Sign the waiver." And in that waiver was their outside legal counsel for the firm was also put as our legal counsel. So you now have an investor with representation from attorneys, and have the issuer, the client, also waive that conflict. And guess what happens when the proverbial stuff hits the fan? Guess where counsel's going to side?
yeah.
And so you need to be super, super careful where you get advice from. And that's why I wanted to spend a little time with you, just kick stuff around, because there's no MBA school, some class you're going to take to say like, you should be really careful who you listen to,
Yeah.
and here's why. So that's kind of my first lesson learned that I
Well,
would share with
I'll
folks.
bounce off of that. So, I'm an entrepreneur by trade. I run an investor relations, well, consulting firm now that started as an investor relations firm. But one of the things that we do for our clients is we write business plans, and I've personally written 1,000 business plans for clients in various industries.
Oh,
As a company, we've written 2,000 now over since 2012, and it's how I started the company. I was writing business plans. I knew how to write a business plan. I figured I'd start a business around that, and that's how I started. And one of the things that I see that my clients hiccup on is exactly what you're talking about: is who to take advice from. And I always tell people Google gives the worst advice, because if you type into Google today, "How do I start a business?" They're like, "Write a business plan, form an LLC, get a logo, get a website." All of a sudden, you're $10,000 in and you haven't made a dollar. And the point of a business is to make money. Like, that's the point of a business. The point of a business is to make money. And today, in what we talked about, like the microwave society, right? You want the answer right now. And sometimes that answer comes from a service provider. And that service provider always wants to sell you something.
yep.
They always want to sell you something. So if the guy's making LLCs, he's going to tell you the most important thing is an LLC. If the guy is filing trademarks, for a living, he's going to tell you the most important thing is your intellectual property. And I have a little story. When I was graduating law school, I've started a series of businesses, a whole bunch of businesses. Many of them have failed. Some of them have been successful. Some of them have been okay, right? But we started a water company in law school. And imagine starting a company with a bunch of lawyers, right? What do you think they think? What do you think they think we do, right? They're like, "We need an operating agreement. We need an LLC. We need to make sure our intellectual property's right," right? So our journey took us all the way to, Michigan to bottle water. And we had a whole case full of water. We raised some money, and we built the water. We got the logo. We got the labels. What we didn't have was a customer, right? And the business ended up floundering after 2 years. A lot of lesson learned, but to your point, the lesson I learned there was, number one, sales cures all. That's the point of a business. Sales, like, focus on sales. and everything else will really fall into place. But focus on building a business and not playing business. Because I've seen a lot of clients that
Oh,
come to me
playing
after,
business on TV, like I'm doing
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, kind of, right? Because I say that the Shark Tank did a horrible injustice to entrepreneurs because so many entrepreneurs are now like, let's raise money. And it's like, instead of trying to figure out how to get the revenue started or how to make pre-sales, right? They're right away to let's form an LLC, let's create a logo. And they're 10,000, 6 months, 100,000, $1 million in without any idea on how to make any sales. So that was one of my things was not just be careful who you take advice on, but make sure you keep the core of your business a business, which is the point of a business is to make money. It's not to develop the greatest technology on earth. It's not to and again, there's some outliers here because if you talk about some of the leading guys in entrepreneurs in the field, like an Elon Musk, right? You don't hear him talk about sales. So it's very misleading, right? When entrepreneurs listen to a guy like that, where they say, "Well, I'm going to follow my passion," but he has sales. He has sales, right? He understands that having an economical sales model and a sustainable business model is important to the future of your company. So that was one of the lessons that we learned the hard way, which was, hey, make sure you're focused on developing an actual business and not just playing business. Because to your exact point, if you go to a lawyer, they're going to tell you the lawyer things you need. If you go to an accountant, they're going to tell you the accountant things you need. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to look internally and say, what do I really need? Right. And what is it really that's going to push my business forward? So that was one of the things that I had here was one, sales cures all was one of the lessons that I learned. And make sure you're in business, not just playing business,
Yep,
because
yep.
they look and feel very similar. They look and feel very similar.
All right, let me kick it back to you with a completely different one. Um, so I live here in Silicon Valley. We started Knightscope in 2013, and at the time, it's a lot more now. Maybe $100 billion went into startups every year. Almost all of it into software kind of companies, and a little bit into biotech, and then a tiny minuscule amount into other.
Yeah.
And we couldn't raise any money for a Knightscope. Everyone's like, it's too complicated. Robots aren't, it's not ready for prime time.
They didn't really
Uh,
like hardware too much in Silicon Valley.
yeah, it's hardware. I actually, one VC actually literally to my face tell me, um, it's hardware and software. It's too complicated. You should pick one. And I'm like, the end user doesn't care if it's software, hardware, telecom, firmware. They need a solution. And
Yeah.
it gets like going over to Apple or Tesla and go like, it's too complicated. It's hardware and software. Like you should pick one. It's like completely devoid of reality. So anyway, couldn't get any money raised, and I still really wanted to build this. And most entrepreneurs would have just like, okay, everybody told me no, so I'll go crawl under a rock and go work on something else. And decided to go raise money a different way. And most people know the story, but before the public listing, we had raised about $120 million from 35,000 investors. And I
Wow.
kid you not, like, oh, it feels like every day. It's not every day, so now entrepreneurs pinging me, asking me how to do that or how to go raise money. And I wish sometimes I had the time to just, sit with everybody to try to help. But I try to answer his questions as much as possible. And one of the keys and kind of lessons learned here, and you see it on Twitter sometimes, people are amazed by folks that um, are less successful or not doing really well or having some issues and are the most unresponsive people in the world. And then the people that are wildly successful, millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires, get back to you in 3 minutes or 10 minutes or, very quickly, and you're kind of in shock. And
Mm.
so, you know, I don't know what the ratio is, but maybe you close 1, 2, 3% of the investors you talk to.
Yeah.
We closed 35,000. So you can imagine how many people said no. But
Exactly.
one of the reasons we were able to get people to help and support what we're trying to do is to be responsive and engaged. And there's this funny thing if you go to knightscope.com/rise, there's a little instant messaging button at the bottom right. If you click that blue button, it's kind of not customer service or a bot. It's like literally me answering questions directly. And I had this hilarious exchange with somebody. It was like, this is a bot. I'm like, no, this is Bill, the CEO. I'm not a bot. Prove to me you're not a bot. And there's like this whole back and forth until they finally, by the 10th exchange, you're like, oh my God, I feel so stupid. You're not a bot. And it was hilarious, but indicative of being willing to try to get back to everyone. So obviously, I can't answer every sales vendor, somebody selling me something, or the 10,000 recruiters that ping me. But I truly try to get back to as many people as I can and try to do it quickly. And I try really hard to have my inbox literally be zero. If
Zero it
gonna get
out.
off this call and there's gonna be three emails in my inbox, I'm gonna start panicking because I didn't get back to somebody, or on LinkedIn or on, Twitter's hard, but I try to answer as much as I can. And the lesson learned here is just be responsive and also be careful how you conduct yourself with folks, because you have no idea who you're speaking to and who they might know, right? Um, I had prior staff like, why are you answering questions with these, you know, $10,000 investor, $200 investor, you should be spending time. Yeah, well, or early days in Knightscope, one of the we had a minimum, I think, for one of the early rounds was like 20 or 25,000. But this person particularly, like, I really want in the deal. I really want in the deal. Can you lower the minimum? So I loaded to 10 grand to let him in the deal. And he's the one that helped us land a $5 million investment like a year or two later. You,
Wow.
like you literally never know who you're talking to. So, try to get back to people as best you can. Try to get to, a zero inbox, and, try to be treated the way, you'd like to be treated. And it's not easy. It's very hard, especially people that write these long dissertations, and then I got to sit and try to legally answer everything that they're asking
Yeah.
for. And sometimes can't legally answer what they're asking, but I try really hard. I'm not perfect, don't get me wrong, but the lesson learned here is if you want a lot of support from people, you need to be responsive.
Wow. Well, that's I thought I was the only one that zeroed out my inbox on Gmail. So that's pretty cool to know someone else. And I'll second that notion because dealing with a lot of CEOs, the most successful get back to me instantly. Like it's bar none get back to me instantly. And one of the
It's not because,
stories that
Nick, I don't want to be the bottleneck. Like, I don't want to be the one holding up progress. Like, my teammate asked for something or a client asked for something. The last thing that should happen is, oh, well, I don't know, he's thinking about it, or he's, needs a day or two to ponder.
well,
Like,
to your point, right? You don't know who anyone knows. And in a market of what are there 8 billion people in the world? Half the people in the world now have access to the internet. Half. The other half will be on. But to not take advantage of that
yep.
is insane, right? Jeff Bezos, in one of his interviews, said for the first, I think, 10 years of Amazon, every customer service email got forwarded to his email. Jeff at Amazon.com, by the way, if you guys want to send
Yep.
him an email, right? But he was looking at every single email, and I've seen the same thing. I've seen the same thing. So here, I'll give you one of mine here, and this goes along with exactly what I said about the CEO clients and the lesson I learned. I'll give you the lesson first, and then I'll tell you the story. And this has happened several times in my life, but the lesson is the bigger the goal, the more audacious the goal, usually the easier it is, which seems almost counterintuitive. It seems almost counterintuitive. Okay.
My wife says
So
the same thing. 2x improvement is sometimes harder than a 10x improvement. Like, just go work
I'll
on the big thing.
yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you the just two examples of this in my life. The year I'm 42 now. I went to college later, but the year was 2009. the financial crisis was happening. I was graduating from the University of Connecticut with a degree in finance, and everyone around me
I
was
got an
saying,
offer from UConn, full ride,
"You
and I
should have
didn't take
came. We
it.
would have hung out there.
I
We would
didn't
have hung
take
out
it.
there." But I'm graduating, and everyone's giving me their apologies because all the banks are consolidating. Merrill Lynch got bought out by Bank of America. Um, all the banks were closing on Wall Street, and my goal was to get a job on Wall Street. And I said, I want to get a job at the New York Stock Exchange. At the time, I one of my goals was I wanted to be the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, which I later pivoted, and I have another story for that. But my goal was I want to get into the New York Stock Exchange. And everyone's telling me there's no way. There's just no way. Like all the banks are closing down. You're not from a big breed school. You don't know anybody there. Anyway, I applied. Long story short, I got the job. And I had called them relentlessly after I put in the application. And the lady told me, she said, no one else called. She said, no one else called. And then at the end of the internship, I sent the letter postmarked to the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, followed with an email. And he got back to me too. And he told me the same thing. He said, no other intern emailed me. No other intern emailed me, right? So that was the first time I started realizing, wow, this is interesting that I was aiming somewhere. And what I realized was that none of my other classmates even bothered to apply.
Or
They
dare.
didn't, bo- they didn't think they could get there because of the market conditions, right? So they didn't even bother to apply. And I've seen this play out again and again in my career where I'm targeting something. And if I target something bigger, it becomes easier. And I'll give you the latest one. I have a real estate portfolio, and I'll tell you a story about that too. But I'm working on a grant application, a downtown it's called a DRI grant. It's a downtown rejuvenation initiative grant in upstate New York. And it's for a $10 million grant. And I apply, long story short, after 3 cycles now, I'm the last man standing, right?
Just gotta
And when I
show up, man.
started,
Gotta show
when
up.
well, listen, when I started, everyone kept saying, "Why are you going to apply?" Well, out of the 50 property owners on the street, only 7 applied. And out of the 7, only me lasted till the third round, right? So the bigger the goal, I've realized, whether it's approaching CEOs, which was, when I was in my younger years, that was my goal. My goal was I want to work with public company CEOs. I want to help. I think I can help them build bigger businesses. I think I can help them get bigger. And when I first graduated, people were like, "Dude, you have no experience. You don't know any CEO." I love that excuse, by the way. Like anyone is born with experience, right? But you have no experience, you have no contacts, you don't know what you're doing. And I found that the CEOs are actually easier to get a hold of than the customer service rep because no one has the goals to call the CEO. And if you wake up at 7:30 and you make that call, guess what? He's up there too. He's up thinking about that too. So that was one of the things I've learned in my entrepreneurial journey. And I always get reminders of that. The bigger the goal, the easier it is. And usually, a lot of times when people are having troubles in their business, it's because they're shooting too small and they're in a too much of a crowded space, right? So if they're fighting too much, they haven't really found their competitive advantage or their niche, and they're not looking big enough where it separates them completely from the market. Like if you look at an Elon Musk saying I'm going to Mars, look, there's a lot of other rocket companies. That's just the truth, man. There's a lot of rocket companies. I can go and type in and find 100 other companies that are making rockets right now, but not at the level because he's distinguished himself so much. Now, is he close to getting to Mars? No, he's not. He's not close there, right? But does it prevent him from setting that audacious goal and making it so big that now it literally draws a line in the sand, right? You either got to pick a
Sometimes you can
side.
solve the problem by making the problem bigger, and then it actually becomes solvable. I mean, to maybe build on a little bit on that one, the next lesson is just kind of on the same tone, to be relentless and also whatever, I'm often asked like what's the best advice you can give an entrepreneur? And to me, what you work on is really important. Because I live here in Silicon Valley, there's 20,000 startups. Literally 95% of them fail. 95%. So like the likelihood you're going to make it is really hard. And oh, by the way, for the 5% that did make it wasn't like a straight line. It was super easy.
Yeah, yeah.
It can be absolutely brutal. So my strongest held advice is to have entrepreneurs and founders pick something that they're uh very passionate about, almost the point of a little too much. Like you got to
Obsession.
be enamored with what you're doing, that you really love it, because at 3 in the morning, when the sky's falling, everything's not working, a whole thing's falling apart, you're going to have to pull yourself up and figure out how you're going to fix the damn problem and be able to get to the next step, because no one else is going to help you do it. And if you don't have that passion for it, it can get really, really hard. And I'll give you the actual example of what happened. So in 2018, I hired I won't disclose the name, an investment bank that was supposed to raise 20 million bucks and ended up raising 300 grand. And for 6 months, most startups, not a great thing, but typically are running on 6, 9, 12, 15 months of cash, typically.
Right.
Um, and so 6 months without raising the capital that we needed was a huge problem. It got so bad that, they almost literally bankrupted us. So to tell you how far I was willing to go to make sure that Knightscope would succeed and get to the other side, there's this famous story you keep on bringing up, Elon, famous story that Elon had. There's only 2 weeks of cash left for Tesla, and if he didn't do a big deal and correct it, they were done. And so I actually survived that for 15 months in a row. For 15 months, we were running out of cash every 2 weeks, and that twice, it was 48 hours. And I pulled every legal maneuver possible to make sure that we never miss payroll and that we continued to grow the company. So, sometimes I feel like I'm going to end up with a honorary PhD in financial engineering, but we were able to make it through. But it was brutal. And if I didn't so much believe in what Knightscope was doing, I would never have done what I did for 15 months in a row, to have that level of stress and suffering and pain, and personally guaranteeing stuff, doing sale leasebacks, doing MCAs, which you don't want to do,
Mhm.
credit cards maxed, all this crazy stuff to just make sure that we could make it to fight another day. And for those of you that are either struggling in your business, there's difficulties, there's challenges or whatever, you can make it through, but you got to decide that you're going to make it through. And you just gonna have to kind of, all right, this is going to suck, but I'm going to force this to work. And it takes that level of determination, because you pick something that you're in love with, that you want to make sure succeeds. So just kind of got to keep at it.
Yeah, no, I have stories I'll save for another day, but I know about MCA loans and structured financing and
No
maxed out
bueno.
credit cards. And no bueno. But let me tell you, if we're being honest here, right, that entrepreneurs, that's what it takes. It takes to do whatever it takes when the time comes, and the time will come. If you're in a business, there's no way that the time doesn't come. I'll kind of touch a little bit on that. I have one more for you, and then I'll kick it back to you for the last one. Um, this one is about being careful about what you ask for, and and that affirmations. So, um, I'm a guy who believes that you have to work to get what you want. I don't believe that if you just say it 10 times, it's going to come true, and that if you just continue with affirmations alone, that'll make it happen. But I do believe that you have to be intentional with what you want, and so I've always wanted to build a big company. Um, and real estate I knew was somewhere in the play there. Services I knew, products were in there. So on my real estate, I had decided, I said, well, I want to own property in every single state, and I want to be able to drive from state to state and just stay on my property. And I said this the year before I graduated law school. And, you know, 6 months is about to, I'm about to graduate, 3 months I'm about to graduate, and I have no real estate. I have no money, right? I have none of this. But I keep telling myself, I'm going to own property in all 50 states. I'm going to own property in all 50 states. I'm going to be a real estate tycoon. This is what I'm telling myself, right? So all of a sudden, I get up one day, I get super angry with myself, right? I'm sure entrepreneurs can resonate with this, where now it's like, I got to get this done today. And I took a little bit of my law school loan money, which I had. It was my rent for next month. And I went on eBay and I bought my first piece of land in Arkansas. And the first piece of
On
land
eBay.
on eBay. Now, granted, this is not advice. This is not advice.
Not financial advice. Do your own
Not
diligence.
financial, not real estate advice. I had learned some things in law school, so I knew what I was looking at. I knew how to do some due diligence. I didn't have the money to fly out there, so I bought it sight unseen, right?
Oof.
And I bought it in Arkansas. I think it was like $300. I put it back up for sale for $1,500 because I couldn't afford it. I just couldn't afford it. And I sold it like within 30 days. And right after I sold it, I went and bought another one in Arkansas, 6 in Arizona, 1 in Nevada, 1 in New Mexico, 1 in Michigan.
On eBay?
So I was at, no, now I'm all over the place. Now I'm making calls, right?
Okay.
But in my head, remember what the point of this story is. The point of the story is, be careful what you ask for. Because what I kept saying to myself was, I'm going to own land in all 50 states. I'm going to own real estate in all 50 states. I'm going to own real estate in all 50 states. So now I'm at state 5. Okay, I'm at state 5. I have over 30 properties at this point, and I'm graduating. And everyone's congratulating me. Now, I'm sure a lot of people can resonate this. When you're graduating with the student loans and you have no job and everyone's congratulating, it's kind of like an anomaly, right? Because you're like, congratulations. I'm like,
I'm
just
homeless.
kidding.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's almost like an IPO, right? Like you just IPO'd and everybody's like, congratulations. Like, no, man, this is just the start.
Yeah.
You know, this is just the beginning. So I'm on 5 states, and I keep telling myself, I'm going to own property in all 50 states. I'm going to own property in all 50 states. And I get home. Now I'm back home living with my mother, right? Out of law school, go back home into the state of Connecticut. And looky, the tax man is sending me tax bills for all this land.
Nice.
Now, it wasn't a lot, but it was a lot for me, right, at the time. And I want to say it was like $1,800 altogether, because the raw land is very cheap, you know, with your taxes. And I bought it in very obscure places, like in the desert in Nevada or in Arizona in the desert. So I laid out all these tax bills on my floor, and I'm looking at them. I don't know how I'm going to pay for them. And I say, Nick, you got exactly what you wanted. You wanted to be a real estate tycoon. Everyone's bragging, because I'm telling everyone, right? I bought land here, I bought land there. And everyone's going, what? You sound like a real estate tycoon. And I'm going, yeah. But unfortunately, it wasn't paying me because it was just land.
Yeah.
It was just raw land. So I realized, I said, I set the wrong goal. I just kept saying, I want to be a real estate owner. I didn't say I wanted land that pays
You got what you wanted.
That's not what I wanted. So I restated my goal. And I said, I want real estate that pays me every single month, that I can go and travel around, right? So then I bought a 4-unit building in upstate New York, and then a 16-unit building, and another 3-story. And before you knew it, I had 20-something apartments that were paying me every single month.
Nice.
What's the problem? It wasn't profitable. They were paying me, but the taxes and the maintenance and the deferred maintenance, because it wasn't in the best neighborhood, right, was eating it up. And I said, oh, Nick, you did it again. You got exactly what you want. All I said was, I want property that pays me every month.
Not how much.
Not profitable. I didn't say profitable. So I changed the goal. I said, I want it to be profitable and pay me every single month. So then I made some adjustments. I put them on Airbnb. Airbnb ended up giving me 3 times the rent. And now my properties were profitable. What's the problem? Well, I was still changing bed sheets. That wasn't in my mind. I didn't have that, but I didn't say that. I just said I wanted it profitable, pay me every month. So I restated the goal, and I said I want it to be profitable and passive. And then I got a real estate manager, and now I don't touch it. The money comes in, it's profitable. So this has happened in various other ways in my career. but it made it very clear that
Continuous
what
lessons learned.
continuous lessons learned. And what I realized is that life is like a genie. It will give you what you want, but you have to be very careful what you ask for because it's going to give you exactly what you asked for. Nothing less, nothing more. So I see this a lot of times with CEOs that are like, I just want to take a company public. Then they become public and it's like, oh man, I wanted
I
public, but
didn't know.
I
Yep.
didn't want this part of it, right? Or I didn't want this part. And I always just tell people, just be very intentional about the way you ask for things because more than likely, if you put passion and desire behind something, you're gonna get it. The question is, what did you ask for?
Yep.
Because you got to be very careful. So that's my lesson. And my lesson is be very careful about what you ask for, be intentional, and believe it. And if you believe it, it'll happen. But just be careful what you're asking for and don't be scared to pivot off of what you're asking for.
That's a good one. That's a good one. All right, I'll give you my last one. Um, so this is pre-Knightscope and it happened twice. Uh, and I'll give you the advice first. And this came from a consultant at KPMG. Um, he basically told me, hey, Bill, if it doesn't look good, it doesn't smell good, it doesn't feel right, there's something off, just don't do it. And this will
Sounds
help you in
fair.
life. It'll help you with audits. It'll help you with all kinds of stuff and, stay out of trouble. And that, I don't know why that kind of really stuck with me. And I've used it often in a couple cases, in a life prior to Knightscope. I'm still in shock. I was in these rooms. Twice it happened. One, let's see, when I was in the US and one outside the US. I'm sitting in a room. We're trying to figure out on the first case how to close a important investor. And they had a important kind of key legal clause in there. And if we went along with it, it probably wouldn't be great for us, but we would get the deal done. And I'm sitting in this room with, I'll be careful here, two teammates, colleagues, and one of them says, well, we'll just lie and just get the deal done, and then we'll kind of undo it later. And I'm like, I'm not in this room. And I'm like, I'm in a movie? Like, are you out of your freaking mind? And this was kind of standard operating procedure for this particular person. And I'm like, never in my life would I dare do something like that. And so, thankfully, we didn't go forward with it because I wasn't going to be privy to that kind of shenanigans. And then thinking that's going to be a one-time thing, I'm in a kind of different deal, different set of circumstances, different people sitting across the table from a bunch of folks across the pond. And it was basically the same situation. Massive investor on the other side of the table. If we can just do what they say for, a third of the amount of money and half the amount of time, we're gonna be done and we'll get the deal done and everything will be fine, but knowing damn well we could never live up to what they're asking for. And so the team was basically trying to get me to lie and just say, just go along with it and we'll fix it later. And I ended up, for the second time, tanking the deal because I'm not going to do that. And so, I think unfortunately in this day and age, there's less emphasis on a handshake meaning something, um, people conducting themselves appropriately, but it's still very important. And despite what you might read online or offline, or it does matter and allows me to sleep at night knowing that I would never be privy to something like that. And your integrity is extremely important in how you conduct yourselves. And founders and get themselves in all kinds of weird, awkward situations. And there's nothing wrong with, threading a needle, if you got something really complicated and if I can do this and I can do that, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, you're fine. But don't ever cross, that bright red line. And I think that's really important thing for founders to hear that unfortunately in a lot of parts of the country, it's not emphasized.
Yeah, I think there is a certain tone of transactional versus relationship. And I like to tell my fellow entrepreneurs, look, there's always another deal, but the relationships matter. And if you ruin a relationship because you were dishonest or the person can't trust you anymore, you didn't just screw up that deal. You screwed up a million other deals that not only can they give you, but that they can refer to you.
Yep.
So I couldn't agree more. And I think handshake deals still matter in the right rooms, right?
Yep.
And the bigger the room, the more legitimate some of these players are, the more you'll realize that that's how they got there. They got there because they were people of their word, and what they said, did mean something, and they were honest, and those things do matter. I would disagree that they don't matter. I think you agree that they matter for sure. But yeah, I think that there's definitely a tonality of very transactional relationships, right? And I always tell people relationships matter more than the transaction.
Yep.
Make sure the relationship is good, and there's always another deal to be made. If that's not the right deal, another deal will happen.
Well, my friend Nick, thanks for taking the time, and hopefully a few of our little war stories might help at least one person out there. It's might be going through some stuff, and just hang in there. Tomorrow will be another day to fight the good fight. So with that, we're gonna sign off. And remember, if you're a founder, every day is Monday. See you on the other side.